Alright guys, what is up? Messy desk again, but I've got something that I wanted to talk to you guys about. This is Sean Ames from Heart of America FPV. I've been thinking a lot lately. I want to step up my YouTube game, get you guys some more information here from the desk, and talk about all the silly FPV stuff that's going on in my head pretty much every waking moment of my life. Today I want to talk about motors. Motors. I've got some motors here that I've been putting a lot of thought and energy into lately that I wanted to chat with you guys about. We're going to start with these. So these are essentially the same manufacturer. The Talons, I'm pretty much 99% certain they are made by RC & Power. You may have seen what I joke around and say is the blue version of this motor. This is the RC & Power 2207 plus 1860 kV motor. It's one of the favorite motors for a lot of current pilots. Recently, there was a blue version of this motor. Whether or not it's the exact same motor is yet to be seen, but Alex Vanover's custom motor is essentially a Vanover version of this motor. I've held the Vanover motor and examined it next to this one. I'm going to tell you that I can't tell any difference at all. According to Alex, it's a different air gap. He's awesome. It's a great motor, but I thought it was pretty funny, and I gave him a hard time because he was literally selling air, because he said the air gap was different between this motor and his motor. I don't know. I don't own one of his motors. I did borrow one from a pilot in St. Louis just to take a look at it, and visually I could not tell a difference between the two motors. Also, since I don't own the motor, I was not able to actually test the KV, but with all these motors I've got here right now, I was able to test the KV. These motors were the first RC & Power type motor that I had bought. On paper, this is essentially the same motor as this one. Like I said, only on paper. So let's get the trusty dusty scale out, see what it says here. So this one is 31 grams on the dot. This one is, oh, there we go. This one is 32.7 grams on the dot, and I've been told that is the same weight as the Vanover motor as well, so that's kind of interesting. Initially, I had thought that this was in fact just a different rebrand of this motor because they look pretty similar. The contour of the bell is pretty much the same. They both are 2207 plus in their stator size. They are both listed. I'm going to definitely point out that they're listed at 1860 kV. But when you look at these two compared to each other in person, the original RC & Power motor has some larger magnets. Just looking at this, it looks like maybe the bell is in fact a little thicker on this motor. I've run these motors a pretty good amount, but not really enough to, give a bulletproof claim on them. I did notice that I had a hard crash with one of the Talons into a PVC gate, and I did completely destroy a bell. So that was kind of surprising. That might be just the fact that it's a thinner bell. Now, I also want to point out, before I get real thick into talking about the Talon motors, I absolutely love Heli Nation. I did not hesitate at all in buying these motors because Heli Nation makes phenomenal products. I buy a lot of stuff from there. They have always got really fair prices. Their customer service is really good, and typically what they put out is really good stuff. I have no hesitations, but unfortunately this was not my favorite motor. Initially I didn't have any equipment to do KV testing, but I bought myself one of these guys, a digital tachometer, that allowed me to test the KV. If you look up online, there's plenty of videos that show you how to do that, but I did start testing the KV of these motors because I've been trying to figure out what in fact is the difference of these motors, because I've had a favorite motor and I wasn't sure if I was going to stay with it, so I wanted to really look into a lot of different motors. And right off the bat though, these were the first version of an RC & Power motor that I had gotten, put them on my quad, and I'll tell you, my impressions were not great. Like I said, I did bust a bell on a gate, too small of a sample size to know whether or not that was because of poor durability or not, but I did do that. Things I do like about them, it's got a regular size screw for removing your bell. Also, the bells are on there good, so even after you get that screw out, it takes a lot of force, a lot of love to get the bell off of these things. So, and these are essentially the same. I have broken a bell, although it was on conduit with one of these. So, but all that stuff aside, put these on a quad, and immediately the quad felt like a freaking rocket ship. I assumed that was just because it was a higher KV, being 1860 kV. I'd never flown a motor with an advertised KV that high, so I assumed that was the issue, but it was absolutely too much. it would get into the throttle on a straight, and it was so much kV, so much power that immediately you would get the sag of the battery. When your motors and your prop hit the battery that hard, in the long run, let's say over 100 meters, you actually end up going slower, whereas maybe a less powerful motor is able to sustain higher RPMs longer because it's not as taxing on the battery. So that's something you definitely have to figure out. But these were an absolute rocket ship. Not only were they fast, because fast is good, and these are the FAF motors. You can ask the guys at Heli Nation what that means, but they were absolutely fast. But the throttle response on them was really freaking weird. I'm not the expert necessarily when it comes to these things, but I just noticed compared to what I was used to, it was like the first half of the throttle was nothing. But then once I hit mid-throttle, it was everything. So it literally kind of felt like having your throttle on a switch, and these motors absolutely would send like crazy. Now, I pulled these motors off of the quad. I did some KV testing on them, a bunch of other motors, and I got a lot of really interesting data. These motors ended up testing out at being 1940 kV. I'm going to verify that too. Yeah, these motors ended up actually being, although they're listed at 1860 kV, they ended up being 1940 kV. Like I said, I'd gotten these, I'd flown them, I formed my opinion of them, thinking that they were in fact just a different top bell design of this motor. But I got a bunch of these motors in the mail. There were a few things right out of the box I was excited about. Like I said, the magnet seemed a little bigger, bell seemed a little bigger, so they were definitely a different motor. But hands down, the best thing about these motors compared to these motors is something you might not expect, and that is the prop nut. These Talon motors come with pretty much the worst prop nut. They're low profile prop nuts, so if you have a thick prop, it's the type of thing you need. But this comes with a nice, big, fat, proper prop nut, and it's the same prop nut as what the Vanover's motors come with. So right out of the box, I really love that. I didn't notice initially that the build quality of the bells were a little different and the magnets were different. I did not notice that, but I put these on a quad and immediately they felt a ton better than the Talon motors. But before I actually put these on a quad, since I did have my digital tachometer and stuff, I did go ahead and test the KV, and these RC and Power motors actually tested out to be pretty close to their labeled KV. So range from about 1868, 1865, 1874. So really, really close to the advertised KV on these. So I was pretty excited actually, and I went ahead and put these on a quad, and I put these back on a quad because I ended up doing some testing on 5S with these, and I also did some testing with a 90% throttle limit that made these feel a ton better. If you got a set of Talons, don't throw them out. Just maybe do some different experimenting with them. They might be a great motor for some 5S action, maybe something with a throttle limit, that kind of thing. Or maybe you're just the type of guy that likes to fly with your throttle on a switch. These might be the motor for you. But I took these out and flew them a bunch, and I liked them. I'll tell you, I really, really like this motor. If this is the same motor as Alex's motor, it is in fact a great motor. Not the end-all, be-all, but it's a great motor. The throttle response on it is not anywhere near as weird as the Talons, but it does kind of have some of that weird throttle curve on it. When you're used to a certain thing though, acceleration curve, I guess, or the throttle curve, or the response curve, or whatever you want to call it, the power curve of a motor is something you absolutely need to get used to, and maybe it's just a matter of me not being used to this power curve, but this ended up being a great, great motor. However, I'm not sticking with any of these motors. I've got a bunch of Talons I'm going to sell. I've got a bunch of these I'm going to sell. I'm not going to stick with them because still, even though, and I was in search of something with a lot of these specs. I like the big fat bell screw. I like the fact that it's single strand windings because they tend to take heat a little better. I like this nice big prop nut on this. The response or the power curve still wasn't quite what I wanted, and I did just massive amounts of A/B testing this last week at Buffalo too. I didn't run the Talons on anything. They're definitely not the motor for me, but I ran these, and I ran my current motors. Ta-da! I ran these suckers back to back to back. Essentially, I had 2 quads with these and 2 quads with these, and every single time I am absolutely faster with my OG Hobbywing motors that I've been loving. If you saw my Betaflight NYE edition video, I was talking about it. Part of the reason why I've been trying to find the perfect tune for Betaflight is because I was smoking a lot of motors, and I was smoking a lot of these motors, I was smoking a lot of these motors, I was smoking just a ton of motors, and I wanted to figure that out. And the nice thing thing is, since I've got my New Year's Eve tune dialed in, and essentially that's all I'm doing in that video is I'm taking the default PID tune from the pre-release New Year's Eve version of Betaflight, putting that on Betaflight 404. I'm also still using the RPM filter some, experimenting with that. Honestly, I don't notice the most amount of difference between the RPM filter and my normal New Year's Eve tune, but that's what I'm currently doing. But I've stuck with these motors. Now, these motors, I was excited to test the KV on them because I will tell you, compared to any other motor I've ever flown, these had felt faster. Now, when we get up here into the 1940 KV, there's no motor in this quote-unquote class, which this class is getting pretty wide now, but there's no motor in the class. If you want just raw speed, it's these guys. But even still, I had been comparing these, and these are labeled at a 1750 KV, and I had been comparing them to like Brother Hobby style motors that were 1750-ish KV. I'd been comparing them to Pyro motors, the 2207s or the 2207.5s, you know, those motors that were supposed to be like 1722 KV. And for whatever reason, these motors always, absolutely always destroyed those motors. I currently have all of these working motors on my quads. I didn't want to take them off, so this is actually one that I did burn when I was messing with Flight 1. But just to get a weight test, the 2306s are 28.9 and the 2207s are 30.4. Now here's the other thing I found interesting. Whenever I did the KV test on these suckers, the 2207 ended up being like 1809, 1810 KV. So this is a higher KV motor. Now the weird thing is that this motor always felt pretty stinking close to the same, and I think what it was is, yes, this is a higher KV, but this is a much lighter weight. This quad was able to get to max RPMs just as fast as this motor, and then once it gets there, it's not necessarily as taxing on the battery, so it can stay there longer. Really, flight feel wise, I would say that I like these motors exactly the same, the 2306 and the 2207. There's one reason, and one reason only, that I've decided to go with the 2306. It's not the weight necessarily. I know that's important to a lot of people, not necessarily me. It's not the top end that you get from the 2207, because top end is going to fade as soon as you hit that sag. But the reason why I've chosen the 2306 over the 2207 is one thing only, and that is the fact that the 2207 still has a motor bell clip and the 2306 does have a bell screw. So that was enough reason for me to do that. I'll tell you that when I compared the 2306 to the 2207 Plus RC and Power motors, they were a lot closer than I actually anticipated. They're such a different motor. I mean, everything about these two motors is so freaking different. The weight is different. This is multi-strand. This is single strand. The 2306 ended up being just a smoother power response, a smoother throttle curve. I felt like it wasn't as on and off chunky. This one just feels like there's weird spots in the low to mid throttle that you just don't have the same resolution. So I've decided to go ahead and stick with the Hobbywing motors through this season. I'm not one that likes to change stuff often. I've been talking to a lot of the young guys that are in this hobby. I'm trying to keep up with them, and I know they're all doing crazy 2500 kV 5S stuff, trying to get their quads down to 39 grams or whatever they're doing. The way that I race and the way that my goals are, I have never been limited by the speed of my quad. I have only ever been limited by my ability to control my quad at the higher ends of its power. So my goal is to get to where I can fly to the max potential of my setup, and then maybe I'll start thinking about changing it, but I've got at least 30% before I get there. My setup is fast and feel really good about it. I also feel good about its reliability, especially being the Hobbywing powertrain. So that's it, guys. I just wanted to kind of share with you this little process I've been through in regard to trying to find a great motor. I'm sticking with the Hobbywing motors. I want to know what you're doing, though. Let me know in the comments if you've tried the RC and Power motors, if you've tried the Talons, maybe you've tried another motor out there. I personally haven't ever tried the Zing motors. I wanted to get my hands on some of the Vanover motors. He said he was going to bring me some to Buffalo. I hear that Fat Kid Soren got them instead of me, so whatever. It's good. I don't blame you, Alex. Soren deserves them more than I do. So doing something a little interesting here with affiliate links. So I've got a surprise for you, and it's going to be in the affiliate link in the description. It's not necessarily something you should buy, just a little bit of an inside joke if you went to the race in Buffalo or watched a live stream, you might know what we're talking about. I've heard it said that when you know, you know. So check that out. While you're at Amazon, though, via that affiliate link, do me a huge favor. Do some shopping. Maybe pick yourself up some tools or whatever you got to buy. That helps me out. Don't have to buy the thing that I actually linked. Just find your way to it after you're, through that link. So thanks for checking this out. Please look forward to a lot more content like this on this channel. My goal is to cut down on the amount of just like DVR stuff I share on this channel. Look me up on Facebook if you want to see my DVR, maybe Instagram. I'm trying to learn how to do that. But I'm going to try to reserve Heart of America FPV's YouTube channel for thoughts on gear and that kind of thing. And I'm really trying to push and do more uploads. So if you've got something you'd like to see me talk about, maybe some more DJI HD stuff, maybe we'll get to that. I look forward to connecting with you guys here on YouTube. Guys, thanks for checking this out. We'll catch you next time on Heart of America FPV. Later.